Falcon and the Winter Soldier Episode 2 recap. Spoilers. Full of spoilers. So, definitely have to have watched it. Right, there's a lot of things that I while I was watching it last night, that I just kept checking off in my head. I hope I don't forget anything. So there's a bunch of stuff that I do want to bring up. And hopefully I answer some questions. Hopefully I let you know how I think it's going to play out and how I think it's going, and that's where we're at. It's important to keep in mind, when I was watching WandaVision, it felt like a TV series. It felt like a TV. It had very episodic feeling to it. This doesn't feel like that, and that's the point. I think Kevin Feige said they all do kind of have their own feeling to them. Some of them feel like long movies. I think this is like a long movie rather than a TV show. It's only 6 episodes, so it's less than WandaVision, but it's longer episodes. So it's much more plot development, character development, a lot more depth to it, and a lot more building to things. Really, really taking their time. The pacing is not wrong. It's actually right, because if you think about it as like a 3-act movie, the first 2 episodes, we just watched the first act of the movie. So it is a lot of setting up, a lot of exposition, a lot of kind of character, basically just taking a deep dive look at the characters and setting up the stakes. That's what we've watched in the first 2 episodes. So yeah, that you got to keep that in mind. I think the second 2 episodes are like a second act, so there's going to be a lot of confrontation, a lot of conflict, more action, and I think the end of this episode definitely sets up a lot of that with just the little nod they give us to what's coming. We still haven't seen Sharon Carter yet, and Zemo pops up at the end, but I think it's more important to talk about the new characters in this episode and how they are given depth too. This episode manages to be it's a plot and character development episode, 100%, but with a really cool action sequence in the middle of it too. But I think its ability to both focus on the dynamic between Sam and Bucky, their relationship, and give the main characters more depth, and at the same time give depth to the new characters we meet, even brand new. Like, we saw John Walker last week real quick, but this week there's a full-on moment with him where we really kind of understand his whole mentality and his whole motivation, and even wanting to accept this huge honor to be the next Captain America. It's funny watching. We'll talk. I guess I don't know the order I want to go in talking about things, so I'll start with John Walker, because we start with John Walker in this episode. John Walker is, like I said, an important character from the comics, and he will be an important character in the MCU. It's also interesting to mention that Wyatt Russell, who plays John Walker, he auditioned to play Steve Rogers before Chris Evans did, way back. Interesting, huh? And now he's playing the next Captain America. When I watch John Walker, I both find myself caring about him a little bit and annoyed with him. And that is good, because that's the way this character was supposed to be presented to us. He's really, I feel his motivation, I do. And I genuinely feel when he's trying to genuinely do things in good graces with Sam and Bucky, but then he annoys me because he's not supposed to have this shield at all, right? And he is 100% the version of Captain America that this country, that the United Nations, that the Sokovia Accords wanted in the first place. A lot of what Civil War set up is still being explored here, while at the same time, post-Endgame, a post-Endgame world is being set up and explored in depth. But also, I think just the cornerstone of Captain America in general, all of his movies and elements of those movies that have been touched on are being expanded on. The idea of what it means to have super soldiers, to use people in that way, the what it means to be a superhero for the government, or to be a superhero for on your own terms. And there is that dynamic here. It's played out perfectly in this episode. We got John Walker and a new character that we meet from the comics as well. Battlestar is John Walker's friend, best friend, and I guess sidekick. He's supposed to be the Bucky to John, right? If Bucky was the sidekick to Steve in the beginning of his Captain America career, that's what Battlestar becomes to John Walker. Even when John Walker becomes U.S. agent, Battlestar is like his sidekick. And in the comics, I guess it's similar in this regard, because it doesn't appear that John Walker or Battlestar have superpowers, right? They're just soldiers, but they're the best regular, non-powered or enhanced soldiers that the U.S. government has, right? And they approached their greatest soldier, John Walker, to be the new Captain America, and he passed all the tests in order to do it. But I think that, the dynamic, the difference, the contrast between two heroes who have to abide by the rules and the laws, and two superheroes who are kind of rogue and on their own, right? Sam and Bucky. We get that dynamic. And I think a lot of little things just hint at what it would be to what motivated the government to make this move in the first place. They couldn't get Steve to sign the Sokovia Accords and be on their team. So they made a new Captain America for that purpose. Like, they have one who's going to follow their rules. He's going to be their puppet and do what they need on their terms, right? John Walker even saying little things like, we hacked Red Wing because it's technically government property, that kind of stuff. It just shows how much the Sokovia Accords is still in place for superheroes, right? And then, of course, John being super nice to them the whole time I genuinely felt it, but at the same time, you knew it was coming, right? What he was going to do. He said, you don't want to work with me? Then stay out of my way. So it's going to be like a love-hate thing. As you get to know John more, it's like, you don't deserve to wield this shield in our eyes yet, but he may still prove that he's a hero in his own right, right? And we might be able to relate to that or care about that. Because at the end of the day, right now, it's can I have my arm space? I don't like being up thank you, dog. Good girl. Yeah. I don't, Sam's supposed to be Captain America, not this kid, right? So, this is a good episode for expanding on that idea, and but most importantly, it's a good episode for Sam and Bucky and their relationship, right? So this is a big episode they finally meet up and they team up, but the most powerful scene, there's a lot of staring in this episode, right? Their whole brotherly dynamic is played out. Because there is like this father and brothers kind of as soon as I hear sirens, I get distracted. There's kind of like a father and two kids kind of role playing thing that kind of was Steve, Sam, and Bucky, and it's like Steve was a father and these two were brothers, and they're like that now, trying to figure out how to grieve with the same loss. And they're taking it out on each other, like brothers fighting, like brothers bickering. So I think the most powerful scene in this episode is their kind of like couples therapy scene, which was funny and but also extremely impactful. Their character development was clear. Their relationship development. and the most powerful line in that scene. It's like, if Steve was wrong about you, then maybe he was wrong about me. And it's a lot about what these two guys are. They're trying to figure out what their roles are after in a world without Captain America. Sam believed he did the right thing and doesn't know that he's worthy of wielding that shield, or whether or not he thinks he can or should. And for Bucky, it's just about redemption, whether or not he can be redeemed, whether or not he can be better and be a good person like Steve always knew he was or could be. And so I love that scene because it really breaks down how they're feeling, how they're both really taking things, and their inability to not really. They struggle to work together right now. That is something that is going to have to grow if they're going to defeat the threats that rise. And that's what the point of that sequence was, too. We see that John Walker and his partner can't handle the threat because it's a little bit much for guys who don't have superpowers. We get that. And then we have Sam and Bucky who get their asses beat because they're not really working together. That's the only way they're going to beat these kind of threats. Then we have to talk about the villain reveals of this episode that really came to light. As soon as I saw that all of the Flag Smashers have super soldier enhanced abilities, I immediately thought of Captain America Civil War, because the end of that is meant to look like something similar, and of course it becomes about Tony and Steve. But it looked like a group of super soldiers that were going to be a problem and were going to have to be fought. That's what we get now in this chapter. And it made me think of Zemo. And it made me think maybe Zemo saved super soldier serum. Maybe he created an army. Maybe stuff like that, But then, obviously, I broke it down more and thought about it differently, because you have to realize that as I get to know the Flag Smashers, I don't believe they're your typical villains, because they're not villains. They're more like antagonistic forces, but they're actually relatable. They're a relatable group. They're a relatable people, and what they're fighting for is relatable. A world feeling like they were forgotten or left behind or underappreciated, and that's like in comparison to people who returned from the blip. That is the whole thing about the Flag Smashers. People who were snapped away are now, in their eyes, taken care of better than the people who never got snapped away. And that's a great, great concept. I think the world explorations, exploring the world after Thanos, is very important for the MCU going forward in general. And this really breaks down like some new governmental things, laws and whatnot. There's an act or a law thing that I forget the title of it, they throw at us. Just kind of breaking down what the world is like now. I think that's important. But we also see that Carly, the leader of the Flag Smashers, gets a text from someone that says, you stole what's mine, I'm going to hunt you down and kill you. It still makes me think that there's Zemo is involved in some way, shape, or form in this. Now, Zemo is locked up, though, right? Zemo is locked up because he's been locked up since Civil War. So how could he play a part in this? It's possible he doesn't, but it's also possible he does, because he's that clever of a villain. Now, he's the villain. He's meant to be the villain of this. We'll see how that plays out. At the end of this episode, Bucky says, we're going to have to go see someone who knows all about Hydra, right? And Sam's immediately against it, but then they agree. And they're, of course, talking about Zemo. They're going to go visit Zemo, and that is the last shot of the episode. We see Zemo in his cell, and that sets us up for an interesting next couple episodes, right? And then the story breaks down even further this idea of what it means to be black in America. They did another really good job of expanding on that. I mean, just the scene with the cop and Sam, that was some powerful shit, man. That was crazy. I was like genuinely nervous for a second watching that scene, and then it ends up working out in some regard. But it's crazy, man. That was a good scene, but also we meet two other new characters that are important from the comics. Now, Battlestar's a cool character who will play a part in the MCU, but then we meet two characters that are really, really cool from the comics. We meet Isaiah Bradley, first of all. We meet Isaiah Bradley. Now, Isaiah Bradley in the comics was the second Captain America, technically, in history. He was the Black Captain America, 1950s. In the comics, I think it was a little different in this. It was maybe a little later than that in this. But it was Korean War, so I don't exactly know the placing, but around the Korean War in this. And in the comics, he's actually one of 5 black super soldiers. But the fact that it's like, oh, cool, black super soldiers. But no, they were actually, it's a really big take on how black soldiers were abused by the U.S. government in war. How black U.S. soldiers were used, experimented on, stuff like that. And this really is thrown at us in a powerful way. Isaiah's scene is powerful. We see that he's a super soldier clearly by his strength and everything. The fact that he tells us he beat the shit out of Bucky at one point, and ripped off his arm. But then when he tells us what he went through becoming a super soldier, and then after his time serving as one, is really, really, like, really super relevant, super powerful. And it opens up the door, by the way, for Isaiah Bradley as a character in general. You can do a flashback series. You can do a full-on storyline about Isaiah Bradley if you wanted to. You cast somebody younger, everything. You do the whole storyline. But more importantly than that, we get a brief glimpse of his grandson, was it? Or son? And in the comics, there's importance there. That character's important. That's Elijah Bradley. And Elijah Bradley in the comics becomes Patriot, who is the leader of the Young Avengers, or I think if he's not the leader, he's at least one of them. So more setting up of the Young Avengers. Very, very tiny hint of it here, too, that you wouldn't even notice if you didn't think about it or look it up. But Elijah Bradley was shown to us. Now, we didn't get a name or anything. They could have changed the name. I don't know. Maybe even it's not even really him, but I think it's probably him. So there's another nice setup, and just the meeting of those characters was really cool to have fit in this episode and be given depth and not, stray away from the main storyline of the episode at the same time. It was all around, all of the weaving together of plot lines was very, very well done. Now, it's not super action-packed, but we're building to that, and we get thrown in the mix. We get a lot of that buddy comedy energy now that we knew would come, and I was laughing. I mean, their partnership in the movies, it's picking up where we left off. They never got along really. They would always bicker at each other. It's picking up from that. They're fighting, their whole thing. It's funny and it's deep. And I think it's sad that right now they just want to be done with each other, but really they actually care about each other. And that's where the show will build to that in some way. That they're going to realize that they can be partners and they are friends and that they should work together. But yeah, that's a lot of it's a lot of what the episode was, right? I mentioned the villains and what I think, but also, did I forget anything? I just got to run it through my head, Good episode, not like amazing, not really crazy. It's not something crazy yet. It's just more plot and character development, but in a really effective way. Wow, can I use the same words over and over again a little more when I'm describing something? Jesus. Effective, powerful, impactful. Jesus, come on. But you know what I mean. You're getting the point across. Good episode, set up for great episodes ahead, I think. If it's not your cup of tea, don't watch it. But then, don't watch anything Marvel. Because then when you fucking are like, wait, well, when did this happen? And this, it was in that show you decided not to watch because I guess it didn't do it for you. Everything is Marvel, okay? When you're watching a Marvel show. So everything's important to the overall storyline, right? Keep that in mind and maybe just like sit back, take it in, take it for what it is, and shut the fuck up. Because that's the only way you're going to really appreciate the stuff that comes later, too. For people who love one movie so much, you'll love it even more if you truly understand every plot thread and every reference and every little piece of the overall story. Can't wait for episode 3.